The movie opens with a note stating that between 1945 and 1962, the U.S. government conducted over 300 atomic experiments in the New Mexico desert. However, to this day, they deny the genetic effects caused by the radiation. The scene then cuts to a desert where a group of scientists in hazmat suits are exploring the area. Moments later, a man covered in blood appears out of nowhere and pleads for help. Before the group can even react, a mutant named Pluto arrives and begins attacking them. He swiftly kills everyone with his pickaxe and chains their bodies to his truck before driving away. We are then taken to a rundown gas station in a remote area near San Diego. The owner, Fred, hears strange noises and rushes outside with a gun. He believes it must be a girl named Ruby and shouts her name, but no one responds. Fred then returns home and discovers a bag on his doorstep. He calls out to someone called Jupiter, stating that he's tired of helping them and cannot continue. Nonetheless, he takes the bag inside and opens it. He discovers some jewels and other personal items, including a container with a severed ear. Later, we see a family traveling through the desert in a caravan attached to a broken-down car. The family consists of a retired police officer, Big Bob, and his wife, Ethel, accompanied by their two daughters, Lynn and Brenda, and their son, Bobby. Lynn's husband, Doug, and their infant daughter, Catherine, are also traveling with them. In addition, the family has brought along their two German shepherds, Beauty and Beast. It turns out they're all headed to San Diego for Ethel and Big Bob's silver marriage anniversary vacation. During the journey, Big Bob decides to take a detour, but ends up getting lost. The group soon arrives at an old gas station, where they meet Fred. They ask for directions and also fill up their tank. While Big Bob is talking to Fred, a mutant steals Bobby's red sweatshirt from the car and flees. I like Rab. Moments later, Beauty becomes agitated for some reason and runs inside Fred's store. Lynn is forced to follow her, but she accidentally notices the bag containing jewels. She tries to look into it further, but Fred arrives, prompting her to leave. The man is startled by her presence near the bag and suspects that she has discovered his secret. As the family prepares to leave, he suggests Big Bob take a shortcut through the hills to save 2 hours of travel time. Following this, the family drives for several miles on a very bumpy road that gradually disappears in front of them. They are unaware that they are crossing a former military site that was used for the atomic tests in the 50s. A while later, a mysterious person places a chain with metal spikes on the road. This punctures the tires, causing the caravan to skid and collide with a rock. Fortunately, no one is injured, but the vehicle has a broken axle, leaving the family stranded in the desert. They attempt to call for help, but find there's no signal in the area. With no other choice, Big Bob decides to walk back to the gas station, while Doug heads in the opposite direction to seek help. The rest of the family then sets up a picnic table, unaware that someone is watching them through binoculars. Everyone knows that mutants understand binoculars. Shortly after, Beauty starts barking loudly and runs into the hills. Bobby sees this and chases her down to bring her back. He soon hears the dog whimpering, which makes him worried. Bobby then searches for several minutes and comes across a shocking sight: Beauty's mutilated remains on the ground. This devastates him and he cries while holding her carcass. He then attempts to flee but accidentally slips and gets knocked out. Bobby's unconscious body is discovered by a mutant girl named Ruby, who is wearing his red sweatshirt. She finds him fascinating and continues to stare at him. Meanwhile, another mutant, Goggle, who had killed the dog, is busy feeding on her remains. Elsewhere, Doug arrives at the end of the road and finds a large bomb crater filled with numerous vehicles. After inspecting them, he discovers that all the cars are damaged, which shocks him. On the other hand, Big Bob reaches the gas station and finds it deserted. As he explores, he comes across old newspaper articles in the store. They reveal that the location where his family is stranded was a U.S. Army nuclear weapons test site in the 50s. The subsequent radiation exposure disfigured some miners and devastated their habitat. The radiation was a bigger threat to the miners than Dr. Disrespect. In retaliation, the mutants have been killing everyone who enters the area. Aware of the danger, Bob pulls out his gun and gets ready to face the monsters. He then hears Fred mumbling something in the distance and discovers him in the latrine, drunk. Before Bob can ask any questions, Fred says he can't do this anymore and commits the unthinkable. This freaks out poor Big Bob and he tries to flee, but the mutant leader Jupiter appears and renders him unconscious. He then drags Bob away with the help of other mutants mutants, Lizard and Pluto. Back at the caravan, the family is worried that the two men haven't arrived, and now Bobby is also missing. Brenda then goes in search of her brother and fortunately finds him on the ground. She brings him back to the caravan and he wakes up shortly after. Although Bobby is shaken, he doesn't mention Beauty's death and simply says that he couldn't find her. Not long after, Doug returns with a baseball bat, a fishing rod, and other items discovered inside several abandoned vehicles. As night falls, Bobby becomes increasingly worried about his father. However, the others reassure him that he is Big Bob and nothing will happen to him. Lynn and Doug sleep in the car while the rest of the family sleeps in the caravan. After a while, Bobby hears some unusual noises, and when he goes outside, he discovers that Beast is also missing. We then see the dog running into the hills, where he comes across the remains of Beauty. Bobby becomes very anxious and goes to wake up Lynn and Doug. He finally tells them about Beauty's death and how her body was torn to pieces. Before they can decide what to do, they hear Big Bob crying in the distance. It turns out several mutants have tied him up to a tree and are burning him alive. Doug, Ethel, Lynn, and Bobby rush to help him with a fire extinguisher, leaving Brenda alone in the caravan. Taking advantage of this, the mutants sneak inside and begin assaulting her. Lynn soon hears her sister's cries and rushes to help her. However, Lizard holds her at gunpoint and proceeds to drink milk from her breasts. Outside, Doug desperately tries to save his father-in-law, but Bob has already been burnt to a crisp. Ethel then hears Brenda's screams and rushes to the caravan. She witnesses the mutants assaulting her daughters and tries to fight them, but Lizard ends up shooting her. This enrages Lynn, and she stabs the mutant in the leg with a screwdriver, causing him excruciating pain. Ow! Unfortunately, he retaliates by shooting her in the head, killing her instantly. With the gun out of bullets, Lizard and Pluto run away, but take baby Catherine along with them. Moments later, Doug and Bobby return to the trailer, only to discover Lynn dead and Ethel breathing her last. Brenda is also severely traumatized by what just happened to her. Meanwhile, Goggle watches them through binoculars and communicates with his companions via walkie-talkie, but he's soon found by Beast, who viciously rips him to pieces. Back in the caravan, Doug and Bobby are horrified to realize that the mutants have taken Catherine away. As they discuss what they should do, they suddenly hear noises from outside. It turns out that Beast has returned, along with Goggle's hands and the walkie-talkie. They listen to the device and hear the mutants preparing to strike again. Doug then inquires about his daughter and overhears her crying on the other end, leaving him distraught. The next day, Doug grabs a baseball bat and goes in search of the mutants' hideout, with Beast guiding him. After navigating through the mines, he arrives at an abandoned village that served as a target for nuclear weapon tests. He soon hears a baby's cries coming from a house, so he goes inside. Doug successfully finds Catherine in the bedroom, while a female mutant named Big Mama watches television in the living room. He tries to sneak past her, but the mutant notices his reflection on the TV screen and quickly knocks him out. "You in Big Mama's house now." Shortly after, Doug wakes up in a freezer and is horrified to find himself surrounded by mutilated body parts. He manages to flee and continues his search for his daughter. During this time, he meets an immobile mutant named Big Brain, who recounts the history of the mutant clans. I didn't know we were getting lore. They were once miners in the village who were forced to leave when the U.S. government decided to conduct nuclear tests in the area. Some villagers fled the area entirely, while others sought refuge in the mines, believing they were safe. However, the fallout from the nuclear testing resulted in severe mutations instead. As soon as Big Brain concludes his story, he summons Pluto to attack Doug. The mutant then chases him throughout the house, hell-bent on killing him. At one point, Beast tries to intervene, but Pluto easily throws him aside. He eventually corners Doug and manages to chop off 2 of his fingers with an axe. But before Pluto can finish him off completely, Doug attacks him with a screwdriver. He ends up impaling Pluto's foot, causing him to scream in pain. Doug then uses a small American flag to stab him through the neck, finally ending his life. Patriotism is a weird choice. The mutants are American too. As he departs, he is attacked by another mutant on the way, but Doug easily kills him and takes his rifle. Big Brain then radios Lizard and orders him to kill the baby. However, he himself is torn apart and killed by Beast moments later. Elsewhere, as Ruby is taking care of Catherine, Lizard enters the room to finish the job. She reluctantly hands over the baby and departs, but just when Lizard prepares to carry out the act, he discovers that it's only a pig. Turns out Ruby still carries human emotions, and she couldn't let the baby die. She is currently fleeing into the hills with Catherine, hoping they can be safe there. On the other hand, Bobby and Brenda load the dead bodies of their mother and sister into the car. They then set up a simple defense system using fishing rod wire to avoid surprise attacks. They also fill the caravan with propane gas and use a matchbox's sulfur strip and some matches to create a makeshift ignition switch. While doing this, they notice that their mother's body is missing, which worries them. Bobby then rushes to the hills and sees Jupiter devouring his mother's heart. He manages to capture the mutant's attention and lures him to the caravan. When Jupiter arrives at the caravan, the siblings lock themselves inside. However, the mutant doesn't give up and tries to attack them through the window. He manages to grab Brenda, but Bobby ties his hands to the windows with a cord. The siblings then escape through the rear door while the mutant struggles to break free. He eventually succeeds and rushes to open the door, but since the caravan is filled with propane gas, the friction from the sliding door ignites a fire. This results in an explosion which causes Jupiter to be engulfed in flames. Meanwhile, in the hills, Doug spots Ruby running with his baby and follows her. He catches up to her and eventually persuades her to hand over the baby. Just then, Lizard appears and a violent fight breaks out between the two. The mutant soon gains the upper hand and bashes our hero with a spike strip, apparently knocking him out. He then turns his attention to Ruby and proceeds to attack her, but Doug gets up in the nick of time and shoots Lizard with his gun. After this, he approaches Ruby and finally gains custody of his daughter. Funny way to put it. Just when it seems the danger has been averted, Lizard suddenly rises and prepares to launch another attack. But before he can do so, Ruby throws herself at him. This results in both of them falling off a cliff, possibly to their deaths. In the wreckage of the caravan, Jupiter survives, but is severely burned. He is soon found by the siblings, who impale him through the head with a pickaxe, ending his miserable life. They then notice Doug in the distance, who has arrived with Catherine and Beast. The family hugs each other in relief, knowing that they can finally leave the area. However, unbeknownst to them, someone is observing them through binoculars from the hills.